I don't often share my opinions on this channel. Usually I keep the videos tutorial focused or about more technical info, but every once in a while, it's fun to share some thoughts that, at the very least, will create some conversation around random audio topics. Maybe you'll change my perspective on something, maybe I'll change yours, who knows. So, let's jump into audio hot takes, controversial music production opinions. Now, the first thought I want to float by you is that air filters are either irrelevant or they're harmful. Now, you've seen an air filter before, I'm sure, made popular by that Mag EQ4 with the filter that extends to 40 kilohertz. Now, when you're not looking behind the scenes, this seems to make sense. You turn it on, boost the filter, and suddenly it sounds clearer. However, what we're hearing is a high shelf filter that extends from the center frequency of the air band down into the audible range. For example, if I enable a 40 kilohertz shelf, then what sounds good or what I'm hearing is a mild shelf to roughly 12 kilohertz and above, depending on how greatly I've amplified the shelf at 40 kilohertz. The same thing could be accomplished by creating a filter that boosts 12 kilohertz and above by the same amount. If this were the only issue, I wouldn't really care, but boosting 40 kilohertz will likely increase aliasing, noise, and introduce other unwanted artifacts like intermodulation distortion. Now say I place this before a saturator and I boost frequencies near or above the Nyquist cutoff. I'll absolutely increase aliasing distortion. Or say my recording environment includes a subtle high-pitched whine from an AC unit or a cheap dimmer switch that's above the cutoff and it's reflected down the spectrum. It's inaudible, but boosting it increases it enough until it's audible. The point being, I can create the same beneficial effect of an air filter by using a lower frequency shelf filter, while avoiding any of the drawbacks that come from using the air filter. So let's compare a high shelf at 12 kilohertz and above, amplified to the same extent as an air filter would. Notice that they sound the same, but one filter won't exacerbate aliasing.
I woke up in a daze, you were talking to me. So I fake like something you said, I just couldn't believe. I woke up in a daze, you were talking to me. So I fake like something you said, I just couldn't believe.
Next up, let's discuss how you don't need to record higher than 48 kilohertz. So I used to work at a really well-equipped studio back in 2019, and they insisted on recording at 192 kilohertz, 32-bit floating point. Now it sounded fine. However, once the session got above 40 or so tracks, the latency would interrupt any overdubs we were trying to do, since we had to increase the buffer size to keep it running. Now technically, recording at 192 kilohertz should reduce latency, but once the computer is at capacity, so to speak, there's nothing you can do to give either yourself or the performer an immediate signal to perform to. Now, when this limitation is coupled with the fact that there are no studies that support that a higher sampling rate has any perceivable effect, then it makes you ask, what's the point? If you plan on saturating high frequencies in the box, then I can understand a higher sampling rate, but in the rare instances in which this is needed, oversampling might be a better option than running the entire session at a higher rate. If that higher rate will impede your ability to produce, then oversampling the one or two tracks that need it is a better solution. Furthermore, microphones, hardware units, mixing and recording consoles, and interfaces are all band limited, meaning they reproduce the signal up to about 20 kilohertz before there's a steep drop-off in amplitude. For example, say I have this Apollo Twin. The conversion goes up to 192 kilohertz, meaning it can reproduce frequencies up to 96 kilohertz. That said, I'm using a Neumann U87 to record. Now its response is 20 Hz to 20 kilohertz. That mic is plugged into the Apollo's Unison mic preamp with a frequency response of 20 Hz to 20 kilohertz. You kind of see where I'm going with this. No frequencies will ever go high enough to necessitate this high of a sampling rate. The one exception being if you record a vinyl record, which can go higher if the turntable that's used supports it. So, despite the trend of using higher and higher sampling rates for the sake of increased fidelity, it doesn't make much sense to record higher than 48 kilohertz, except in special cases. So, let's listen to a recording done in 48 kilohertz versus one done in 192 kilohertz and let me know if you can hear a difference.
Pressure pushing down on my tiny little mind, oh Lord. Oh Lord.
Real quick, Sage Audio is an analog mastering studio. We've been around for 20 years, and mastering starts at $49 a track. There's a link in the description and an ad at the end of the video if you want to learn more. Now, this next opinion is gonna annoy some folks for sure, and I'm probably a little biased, but yes, analog is still better sounding. Now, this is of course subjective, but there are technical reasons that analog sounds better. It isn't about the harmonics. We can replicate these with plugins, and the same could be said for the variable slew rates or other small nuances. Now, the real reason it sounds better is a concept that I covered in the last chapter, band limiting. Now, imagine I'm recording an electric guitar, and I use two different setups. In the first setup, I record the guitar directly into the interface. To get a distorted sound or a sound that's more indicative of a guitar amp, I use saturation plugins or pedal emulations, and maybe an impulse response for cab modeling and some reverb. In the second instance, I use a real guitar amp and pedals. A mic is placed near the speaker, then that's run into the interface. So ignoring the additional variables that come with recording the amp, like the air temperature, the relative level of the amp and the mic, the room's influence on the recording, and so on, why would one sound better than the other? Well, in the digital setup, the distortion that I use will likely send harmonics above the max supported frequency, creating aliasing. And this is true even if I use oversampling or record at a higher sampling rate. The convolution plugin I used for the cab modeling uses FIR filters, meaning it creates pre-ringing distortion. Any electromagnetic noise from the guitar will be recorded since the direct input supports frequencies up to 20 kHz. Now, these aren't huge issues, but they do add up. Now let's compare this to the guitar cap. The distortion and the guitar's noise are capped at the guitar speaker's frequency limitation, which is usually 6 to 7 kHz. This means less perceivable noise and no aliasing distortion. The reverb and EQ introduce no pre-ringing distortion, meaning the transient response of the guitar is more indicative of the instrument. It's not altered by digital filters and their limitations. Now apply this concept to any instrument you might record. What could be considered a limitation of analog equipment, the frequency response, helps minimize unwanted artifacts. If my outboard gear can saturate, reverberate, equalize, or perform any other task without the addition of aliasing and or pre-ringing, then the overall project will benefit greatly. To show this, let's take a listen to two guitar recordings, one performed with an amp and outboard gear, and the other the DI. Notice that I can attempt to match the DI recording as closely as possible, but even in this isolated recording, there's a noticeable difference. Get professional analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Seriously though, when people work with us, they get results. That's why major industry professionals like Keith Urban's producer Aaron Schurz works with us, Grammy award-winning AJ Castillo, Billboard #1 charted artist Megan Lindsay, Grammy award-winning artist Tulis, The Voice singer Cody Ballou, Grammy-nominated producer Tyler Kane, Warner Music artist Ricky Young, and the list goes on. Why waste your time creating masters that don't accurately translate what you hear in your head when you could instantly fix a problem by clicking the link in the description and working directly with professionals who have already done what you're trying to do? We've mastered thousands of songs that accurately translate what each client hears in their head, and it'll work for you too. Click the link in the description now and get direct access to us for personalized analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head.